Jeremey Loudenback, senior editor at the Chronicles of Social Change. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you, Alex.
A lot of the new laws we've been talking about on the show were just these huge laws with really big changes, but sometimes it's also important to look on those things that may look like they're just small little technical changes on the surface, but could have a huge impact on an individual's life. And I think on that front, let's talk about Assembly Bill 1061, which went into effect on the 1st. What does this do?
Sure. Well, this is kind of following a trend over the past 5 years where California, as part of a child welfare reform, is looking to make sure that the children in the care of the state are tasked as much as possible living in homes in much better environments. So what 1061 does is it tries to keep these kids placed in homes without going through a lot of these placement disruptions. And as we've seen recently, the experience of a lot of children in foster care is rough. They're bounced from placement to placement, and that's important not only because it's difficult to maintain and create these nourishing relationships with caregivers. It's also tough to succeed in school when you're bounced from school to school, and also, as we know, it takes a tremendous toll in terms of trauma and in the brain. So what 1061 does is it looks at those youth who are in probation or who are in foster care placements overseen by probation department. Now that's a little bit different. There are nearly 60,000 kids that are in the foster care system overseen by your Child Protective Services. About 2,500 or so children are in placements with foster parents or relatives, which are overseen by the probation department, usually because they don't have a family to go home to or things are rough. And so they are placed in this foster care. What this does is it creates new ways, new safeguards for these children. So it says instead of getting what is known as a 7-day notice, which a lot of children in foster care dread, it says if you want to change a child's placement, you must do it within 14 days. And that gives time for the social worker or the probation officer to kind of see if anything can be done to preserve that placement. It also tells probation officers that they need to create a preservation plan, see if there's any ways to kind of work things out to make sure that we avoid bouncing these children from placement to placement.
And again, it might say 7 days, 14 days. To some, that might seem like a small difference, but you could see that could really make a huge difference, especially in a child's life. Another one which looks at one particular demographic of children is Assembly Bill 686, which brings some changes to children of Native American descent. Really, can you tell us what's happening
there? Yeah, absolutely.
there?
Well, that's a huge issue in California, which has the highest number of Native American or indigenous people in the country. And that is a big deal in child welfare, where there are many Native American children placed into foster care. What this bill does is it tries to strengthen and create placements where children can be placed in a socially or culturally responsive environment, hopefully with other Native American families. Yeah. And one really interesting thing that this bill does is it creates a situation where courts, either child custody or child welfare courts, are now going to be equipped with telephone or electronic communications devices, which might allow greater communication with tribal agencies, which often may be located hundreds of miles away. That way, when we have a family, we might be able to say there's a family, a child of Cherokee descent. We might be able to get the tribe, which might be in Oklahoma or someplace far away, have them pipe into that court proceeding and find out if there's a way to keep them within the cultural and important social traditions of that tribe and find a family that could take care of that child so they're not just thrown into a strange family that doesn't understand their traditions.
No, that totally makes sense. Jeremy, we have literally less than a minute left, but one I wanted to ask you about, Assembly Bill 1235 changes the names of facilities currently labeled as runaway and homeless youth shelters. Briefly just tell us, what's the new name? And it sounds like a matter of semantics. Why is this important?
Well, a little bit. Yeah, it does change these to sort of homelessness prevention centers. And there's 11 of these kind of homeless shelters across the state. What it does is it expands eligibility to kind of more youth under the age of 18 who are at enormous risk of becoming homelessness. And of course, in LA County, this is a huge issue. We've seen youth homelessness ages 18 to 24 rise by 22%. So this is an opportunity to kind of wrap these children with preventative services, see if we can find a placement for them in the foster care system and to receive other systems so they don't end up on the street.
A lot of important changes happening in 2020. Jeremy, thank you so much for telling us about them.
Oh, awesome. Thanks for having me.